Welcome to this very special presentation of the Ben Shapiro Show. We will be doing the conversation, a question answer. And if you are a subscriber, you go over to dailywire.com and subscribe right now to ask questions. But we're on Facebook Live, and I'm joined by Elisha Krause.
Hello.
Welcome, Elisha.
Reunited.
And it feels so mediocre.
Yeah, I was going to say that, and you stole my line. But some people on Twitter are excited about it.
I'm good. I'm glad.
It's been 9 months.
I'm thrilled.
Enough time to have a child, and yes, I did have a child in that time.
That is true. She has a second baby.
Yeah, I have a second baby now. So the conversation is brand new. It's going to be lots of fun, and I'm happy to be here guest hosting. And it's streaming now live on the Daily Wire website, the Ben Shapiro Facebook page, and the Daily Wire YouTube channel. It's free for everyone to watch. So if you're a fan, you can watch for free, but only subscribers can ask the questions. To ask a question as a subscriber, be sure to log in to our website, dailywire.com, to watch the live stream. Ask your questions by joining the Daily Wire chat box, where we will pull live questions in as they come. This will be the first of a series that will run with all of our Daily Wire hosts, and our next conversation will be with Andrew Klavan, and will stream live on Tuesday, October 17th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Again, be sure to subscribe today to ask questions and join the conversation. And if you are like my grandfather, who's an annual subscriber, you get this awesome tumbler.
It is the greatest of all tumblers.
They didn't put alcohol in here. There's only agua, so I have issues with that. But so be sure to ask your questions right now, and we'll get things kicked off.
Okay, so.
Are you excited?
I'm so pumped. Yes. I can't even tell you.
We have some questions rolling in already. Some people are just chit-chatting with us. Hey, yes, hi, Austin. It's a TMA reunion.
Oh, yeah.
Remember our superfan, Austin?
I don't.
He would bring us Christmas gifts.
Oh, yes, I do remember. Yes. Very nice guy. Yes,
Sheesh.
he did. He brought me comic books. That's true.
Okay, so we have our first question from Ryan Hill. He's asking if Andrew Breitbart was still alive today. What do you think his views or positions would be on Trump? More specifically, how would his views or position differ from yours, potentially?
So I do think that Andrew probably would have backed Trump. So I differ from a lot of my colleagues who knew Andrew. I knew Andrew really well. I think that Andrew, in the end, would have backed Trump. I do know certain things about Andrew that would not have gone the same as they did during the last election cycle. During the Michelle Fields incident, for example, one thing Andrew never stood for was anybody mistreating his reporters. If he thought that one of his reporters was mistreated, he would have flown down to Florida and asked for a personal apology from Lewandowski, for example. That's who Andrew was. But he would have liked Trump hitting the media. He would not have liked, I think, some of the pandering that Trump did to particular groups. But I think Andrew would have probably been lukewarm on Trump, because Andrew was a counterpuncher and Trump's a counterpuncher. So I actually think that Andrew probably would have supported Trump.
So you would have
not necessarily in the primaries, but I think in the general for sure.
So
I would have differed from him there. I didn't support either major candidate.
What do you think Andrew would have, other than pushing back at the media, what other quality of Trump do you think he would have liked?
That was the only thing Andrew cared about deeply. I mean, when it came to pushing back against the media, that was his big crusade. So I don't think that he would have liked, Trump's dishonesty with regard to the other Republican candidates. I don't think that he would have been fond of Trump ripping George W. Bush over the Iraq War, for example. I remember Andrew being a pretty big proponent of the Iraq War. But I do think that he would have appreciated Trump's counterpunching nature, and that probably would have tipped him over into Trump's camp.
So just to prove that all questions will be asked, unless you guys are ridiculously vulgar, which I don't think that many fans of Ben are. Here's one that just came in that I absolutely love. Have you ever tasted bacon before you became Orthodox? And if so, do you miss eating it?
No, I've never tasted bacon. So even when we were not Orthodox, we never ate pork.
But you had McDonald's.
McDonald's, yes.
And
so we never ate meat and milk together, and we never ate pork. So even when we weren't keeping fully kosher, those were always rules from the time I was a child. I've heard it's fantastic. Is it as good as they say?
I mean, dear God, it's amazing. It's like,
well, it's one of those things where I better hope that I'm right.
Praise Jesus, I can eat bacon, because it's worth it. So,
Jesus didn't eat bacon, guys. I mean, I'm sorry to break it to you, but
I don't know.
He was one of us.
Yeah, he was one of you, but because of him, I can. So
yeah, fair.
Praise the Lord. Anyway, and then Sean also asked, was the wine that Knowles poured for Roaming Millennial from Wink.com?
I don't know the answer to that.
I think
if
he
it
actually,
was not,
I think it was drugstore wine, and he
of
told me the
course it
label,
was.
and I was like, "Oh, son, I'm
Of
never
was.
taking wine advice from you."
Of course, it was drugstore wine from Michael Knowles, a cigar made of paper.
Yeah.
He pretends that he's rich, and he's a cheap, pathetic specimen of a human.
Roger asked, Ben, earlier this year you mentioned that the Daily Wire store will be opening. I'd like to get an update on that.
So that is, I keep saying it's in the works. It's actually in the works.
Yep.
Like we are building that out. And I know that people have been waiting forever because I promised this well over a year ago. But just consider it a promise delayed, not a promise denied. So.
Okay. Daniel asks, what's up with It? I'm assuming he's talking about the movie It, which I'm not going to see.
Okay, I've never seen the movie. I've read the book.
Okay.
The book has one of the worst scenes in the history of literature.
Okay, so you tweeted
There's
the other
a scene
day.
in which a girl, forgive the language, was gangbanged by a bunch of 11. It's 11-year-old girls and 11-year-old boys. It's one 11-year-old girl and like six 11-year-old boys, and they're going around town searching for the evil master clown or whatever. And there's one point where they're trapped in a tunnel, and for no reason whatsoever, he just inserts like a graphic sex scene that's about 10 pages long of this girl being repeatedly, I mean, it's consensual, but she has sex at 11, so it's not really consensual, with like 6 other guys. It's a very weird book. It's not my favorite Stephen King book. He's a weirdo, and that's a very weird section.
Because you
of
kind
his very
of got
weird
into a
book.
Twitter battle with him the other day.
Yeah, it was a very short battle. I mean, he said that Trump was mentally...
Because you quoted that scene, and I was
right,
just
he said
like,
Trump was crazy and had weird thoughts, and I said, dude, you wrote a scene where 11-year-olds gangbang a girl, so I think that,
11-year-olds are sexually active. Like, that in and
of itself is not great,
Yeah.
and then having her have sex with, like, a bunch of them right in a row. And this is actually their pathway to get out of the bad situation they're in. This is considered, like, their pathway to adulthood. If it's supposed to be metaphorical, I think the metaphor kind of sucks. But there you have
Gross.
it.
I have zero desire to see the movie.
I'll probably see it when it comes out on video. I think that horror movies are doing well in theaters because you do need the communal experience in order to truly be freaked out.
Really?
If you're in your home by yourself, yeah, because otherwise my wife walks in from the other room, or I hear the kid crying in the other room, and it
Yeah, and that
interrupts
would
your
freak me
experience.
out. Because I'd be like, oh my God, the clown is in the house. Get the gun.
Right. That's not me so much, but
So you want to be in the dark theater?
If you're gonna watch a horror movie, you sort of have to do it in a theater. But I'm not big on horror, so that means that I will watch it probably outside the theater later, just to see the quality of it.
What's your favorite kind of movie to see in the movie theater? Because you are a movie buff.
Sci-fi.
Really?
Because the visuals usually require you to be in a theater.
Really?
So action, sometimes sci-fi, usually drama you can always rent now.
Okay.
Okay, before we go any further, I do have to say thank you to our sponsors over at Upside.com. So if you're like me and you do a lot of business travel, then it is requisite that you check out Upside.com. They help you bundle flights and hotels. They make sure that you have this concierge service, this basically 6-star concierge service. Recently, there was a navigator who noticed an Upside user was booked in a middle seat on a 3-hour-plus flight, so they automatically upgraded her to an aisle seat with more legroom, which is pretty awesome. That is the beauty of Upside.com. And they also have this amazing thing where when you book their flights, then you also get a $100 or $200 or $300 Amazon gift card kicked back to you directly. So you use the company credit card and you get the Amazon gift card, which is awesome. So go to Upside.com, use my code BEN, and you will get a minimum $100 gift card to Amazon.com. That's code BEN for a minimum $100 gift card to Amazon.com when you buy your next business trip at Upside.com. Again, you deserve a better business trip. They have concierge service. They're there for you all the time. Minimum purchase is required. Terrific service. We use it all the time here at the Daily Wire.
Next question. And I think I know the answer to this, but obviously the audience doesn't. Chris is asking, would you ever consider moving out of California?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not wedded to California. I mean, I've lived here my entire life.
Yeah.
But there are circumstances that would force us to move. I mean, if California does start moving against religious people and dictating that religious people can't raise their children as they see fit, then I would move, for sure.
Well, we've seen that in other states.
Yeah, well, we've seen it in Canada, and we're going to start seeing it in California. So, yeah, that's a serious consideration, and they're going to drive all the religious people out of the state. So, yes, I mean, for business reasons, we've considered moving out of California. California's a horrible state to do business.
And where would you go?
Texas. I know you're no geek, but Texas it would
Boomer.
probably be. Yeah.
Well, Texas has a lot of good things about it, including Greg Abbott, which leads us to, I think he should run for president. And Wes is asking, what would it take for you to run for president in 2020 or 2024?
So 2020
You're
is not going to happen. I am
You're
old
not
enough.
old enough.
I am old enough. I'm like right at the cusp. So
Okay.
let's see, I was born in '84, so that means that in 2020 I would turn 36.
Okay.
But the problem is that I wouldn't want to divide the Republican Party, and I think that whatever happens right now, President Trump is the titular leader of the Republican Party. There are a lot of people very loyal to him. The last thing you want to do is sink the candidate of the Republican Party in the primaries and destroy him for a general election, or alternatively alienate half of the people who are big Trump supporters. So I think that it's Trump or bust for the Republican Party in 2020.
Really?
Further down the line, we'll see what happens. I don't have really any intention of doing anything like that right now, but that's because we're focused right now, obviously, not only on building the company, but in ensuring that government stamped on checking their spelling.
lots of people are really excited about this, like that have that
I don't
agreement.
just get, there are three elements. There's affordability, there is universality, and there's quality. Those three are the elements. You can only have two of those three. You cannot have all three. So any system that you build, most of them only have one. But the free market system creates affordability and quality, but not universality, because you can't force people to get health insurance when they're young and healthy, and because they're people who are just uncoverable. The government systems vary between affordable and universal, but not quality, and quality and universal, but not affordable. Those are because government is there to provide universality.
Okay. So Chris asks, do you think that the current justices are willing to replace Roe v. Wade? And if not, who needs to retire?
Well, Kennedy needs to go. So right now there are 4 justices on the Supreme Court who could theoretically vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. You've got Gorsuch, you've got Thomas, you've got Alito, and you've got Roberts. Roberts, I think, is a very dicey
Because look at what he did on Obamacare.
Right. I don't know that he actually vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. He's big into stare decisis, meaning the case has been decided. He's into precedent. And the problem with people who are into precedent, this is why I like Justice Thomas, is because once you say that you're into precedent, you get to pick and choose which precedents you actually want to follow. Justice Thomas says precedent doesn't matter. All that matters is whether the case was rightly decided.
So how many years?
I'm not sure ever. I mean, really, I think that
the political upheaval.
Yeah, well, the political upheaval will be pretty dramatic. But beyond that, you have to probably replace Roberts. You probably have to replace Kennedy. You certainly have to replace Kennedy. And even then, I think that Thomas is a sure vote. I think that Alito is a sure vote. I think that Roberts is not. And Gorsuch, I'm not sure where he stands on this. Like Gorsuch, I have a feeling that he might vote to overturn Roe v. Wade, but I'm not sure that he's a sure vote on that. Looking at sort of his comments on it. So
I feel like as long as I can remember and going forward, every single time a justice is up before the Senate in the committee being asked these questions, Roe v. Wade always comes up.
Right, and one of the things that drives me absolutely nuts about judicial appointments is that people say, well, there shouldn't be any litmus tests. Of course there should be litmus tests. The litmus test should be, are you willing to overrule Roe v. Wade? And if you say no, then you should obviously not be appointed, because Roe v. Wade is one of the worst decided cases in the history of the court. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that abortion is a fundamental right protected by the Constitution. It's insane. It's totally insane.
But it probably won't happen in our lifetime.
Probably not, but I think that as technology advances, I think you're seeing a lot of minds change. This is one of the cases where I think that you see minds change in the right direction. It used to be, 15 years ago, I would say that the pro-life position was less popular and the anti-same-sex marriage position was more popular, and now they seem to have reversed. The pro-life position is getting more popular as people see babies
Science.
who are 10 weeks old in the womb, and they look like babies. And we still have this sort of lizard brain that says, well, it has to look like a baby in order for me to consider it a human life, which is stupid. But people do work that way. And so there's a large consensus that there need to be heavy restrictions. Third trimester, I think that's going to continue to creep back to the point where pro-lifers continue to win.
Sierra asks, she says that you once said on a podcast that in Judaism, adultery is an unforgivable sin. How then do you explain Abraham and his relationship with God?
So Abraham doesn't commit adultery. Abraham has a concubine. So there's an actual status in biblical law of concubine, which is like an ancient biblical law. It doesn't exist anymore, thank God. But ancient biblical law has the status of concubine, which means you're not on par with the wife, but it's not against the rules for you to have conjugal relations with the husband, right?
Okay.
I mean, and so this is also pre-Bible, actually, right? I mean, this is pre-Torah. Abraham is in the pre-biblical era. Once you get later on, then concubines are still a thing, but much rarer, and you see multiple marriage, and you see man marrying multiple women, and that continues in Judaism for another several hundred years, and then you get to monogamy. So it's you have to apply the standards that were in place at the time. You don't get to apply today's standards of one man, one woman to Abraham having Abraham had more than one wife because he marries after she dies. But Abraham had one wife, and then he had what's her name? Ishmael's mother. Bilhah. Bilhah and Zilpah are
How come
Jacob.
I'm blanking on it? Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, it's so
Should
irritating.
remember this from Sunday school.
It's with a hay. In any case, the bottom line is that those laws do not apply. So Abraham would. The key case would be David. I assume you mean David, right? David actually does commit adultery.
This question specifically was regarding Abraham.
Right. So if you're
David would be a good example.
So if you're talking about David actually has sex with a married woman, right? So
Bathsheba. I remembered her name.
Yeah, that one you get exactly right. And then he proceeds to have her husband essentially murdered. So
yeah.
That one's a really bad one, and all you can say is that there was special dispensation from God, because that one is not really understandable any other way.
Interesting. All right, moving along. Ryan asks, what topic or political issue are you most educated or informed on? And then which one do you think that you're the least informed on?
I feel like I'm pretty well informed. Well, certainly on American law, constitutional jurisprudence, I feel like I'm pretty well informed. Economics, I feel like I'm pretty well informed. Foreign policy, depends on the topic. In terms of kind of broad issues that people spend a lot of time on, the one I feel least comfortable with is global warming. The reason being because I see so much conflicting data coming from different sources, and because I'm not an expert in climatology, I read a bunch of sources and I can understand what I can understand, but I can't pretend to be an expert in something that I don't really understand the minutia of. So that's why what I usually say is there seems to be a consensus that global warming is happening. There seems to be not as much of a consensus about the level as to which it's happening. Even right, the level of why is really the question. Like, man is causing some of it. The question is, how much is man causing? And then there's a final question, which is, how much can man mitigate what's about to happen? Or is it better for us to just technology our way out of it? Because the climate changes over time. So these are all questions that I'm relatively open on, but I'm not doctrinaire on that one. Certainly not doctrinaire enough to dismiss it, and also not doctrinaire enough to say we ought to add trillions of dollars in debt to our economy and destroy the modern economy in order to chase what seems to be bad modeling.
Or have the EPA regulate everything.
Right, exactly. I mean, you actually have to show me the proof on how it's going to work in each particular case. But that's one where I punt a little bit.
Jeremiah wants to know how you met Jeremy Boring.
Oh, so I met Jeremy Boring through a former employer of mine, a guy named Mark Masters. So Mark was the head of Talk Radio Network, which is the syndicator for Laura Ingraham and Michael Savage at the time. And I got my job with Mark actually through Andrew Breitbart. So I was working with Mark, and Mark wanted to get into the movie business, and Jeremy was the head of the super secret, not secret group at all, Friends of Abe, which is the conservative group in Hollywood, the underground conservative group in Hollywood. Jeremy was the president of it. Mark was having conversations with Jeremy about movies, and he brought me into the conversation with Jeremy about movie making. And then Jeremy and I were both in LA, and so we got together and we became friends. And so we've been business partners for, let's see, we started Truth Revolt together in 2013 we started Truth Revolt together. So
I remember it based on like how old my first kid was.
Yeah, exactly. So right, you were there. Yeah, exactly. So we've been formal business partners for 4 years, and then we did kind of a few side projects together before that for a couple of years. So we've known each other for 7 or 8 years now.
And I think it should be stated that it's a miracle that you actually call him a friend, because you don't have that many friends.
This is true. As I've said on my show, I think friends are a giant waste of time. I think my general perspective is that if you have lots and lots of friends, you don't actually have any friends. If you have a few friends and family, then you have friends. Because there are certain people, like people you can call pick you up from the airport is one thing, but people who like your entire need.
If you're going to make somebody drive all the way to LAX, like they better owe you.
That's true. In LA, they better be a really good friend. Like I wouldn't even make Jeremy drive me to the airport here. I mean, that's
you care about him too much.
I wouldn't want him to sacrifice his time and life like that. Like you legitimately have to be a member of my family for me to want you to drive me to the airport.
And then you would love your family so much that you're like, I'll just Uber and save you.
Right, exactly. So yeah.
Forrest asks, what is your standard for who deserves capital punishment?
Who deserves capital punishment? Well, I think that it is based on the egregiousness of the crime. So if you're talking about, murder, obviously, you deserve capital punishment because you've taken a life, and thus a life you shall give. I think when it comes to rape, I've said before that I support the notion of capital punishment for rape. I think there are decent counterarguments. I've heard Dennis Prager make some of them. The idea that if you create capital punishment for rape, you're incentivizing somebody to kill the person they just raped, because then they might as well kill her so she's not a witness, which... not a terrible counter-argument, but on a moral level, I think that the worst of all crimes are rape and murder, and those are the two that I would recommend the death penalty for. Everything else, it's hard for me to get there.
Hard to argue?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to argue in favor of the death penalty for anything except for rape and murder. If something else occurs to me, I will let you know.
Okay. Moving along with another legal question. Someone said that you once said that the film 12 Angry Men, that the boy was guilty.
He is guilty.
In a legal sense, what is the case that he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt?
That none of the doubts that are raised by Henry Fonda in the movie 12 Angry Men are reasonable. So people mistake reasonable doubt for any doubt. Okay, reasonable doubt doesn't mean that any doubt is out of your mind, because there's literally no issue in your life on which you have no doubt whatsoever. If there are, then you're a lucky person. But the vast majority of us have like even minor niggling doubts about things. That's not enough for you to overturn a murder verdict. In that particular case, they said that the particular knife that the kid used at the time was in his pocket and then his story was that it dropped through the bottom of his pocket, if I recall the film correctly. There was an eyewitness who said that she saw the boy kill the father, and the counter evidence is that she wasn't wearing her glasses, which throws slight doubt on her story, but does not undercut the entire thing. There's no alternative theory of the crime. The boy had argued with his father earlier that night. They assume the basic assumption is that Henry Fonda is the good guy in that movie, and that everybody else is biased, and for their own reasons, they're coming to a guilty verdict.
And you're saying that Henry Fonda ain't so good?
I'm saying that Henry Fonda is being a little bit. Let's just say he's enjoying the sound of his own voice a lot in that film. I enjoy the film. I've watched it many times. It's a great movie. But I would vote to convict, and I wouldn't vote to convict based on I hate my son like Lee J. Cobb in that movie. I would vote to convict because the kid's actually guilty.
Do you ever wish that you could be on a jury?
So I wouldn't want to spend the time on a jury. I mean, I've worked in a prosecutor's office, and spending time on a jury doesn't seem like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I will never be able to serve on a jury now because I'm number
of
one.
Who you are?
Because I mean, I'd walk into a room and the defense would be like, "You're out, get out." That's actually happened.
They don't even have to ask you a free speech or Second Amendment question. They'd just be like, "That one go."
And although before I sort of got more well known, this 5-6 years ago, I had jury service, and I went for jury service, and I knew the prosecutor, so that helped me. I was like, "Hey, how are you?" And the defense was like, "Get out." And the prosecutor was like, "You know me, but you'll be objective still." I was like, "No, I won't. I like you. You're my friend." And then out of jury service.
He was like, "Dang it, Shapiro."
Exactly.
He wanted you on that jury real bad. I sometimes wish I could be on a jury, just to put bad guys behind bars.
Well, see, then you probably shouldn't be on the jury, right?
Exactly. Actually, I wish I could be the Punisher. That's what I'd rather be.
That's what you're saying, yeah.
Eric is asking, what do we have to do to get Hillary Clinton to just go away?
I mean, she's not going to just go away ever. I mean, she's just. What else does she have to do with her life? Hang out with Bill? I like that in her book. She keeps talking about how much she loves Bill, and it's like, sweetie, like no. To borrow your language, sweetie, no, that's not a thing.
Yeah, you're not from Oklahoma. It
doesn't work. It sounds condescending and sexist for me, but
it sounds a little weird.
Yeah, it's odd, but no, she's like the idea that she loves her husband is one of the stupider concepts I've ever heard.
But they're never going away. I mean, now she's on this book tour.
Right. Well, she has to justify the fact that she lost the most winnable election in American history to a game show host. I mean, like, how do you lose a presidential election to Donald Trump? You know how bad you have to be at this? Like, this is one of my pet peeves, is everybody keeps saying, oh, it was the Trump movement that won everything. Listen, there was a movement for Trump, no question. There are districts that swung for Trump. But let's not pretend what happened here. What happened here is everyone hated Hillary Clinton. Trump won fewer votes in Wisconsin than Mitt Romney did in 2012. Romney lost the state, Trump won it. No one voted for Hillary Clinton. Trump won fewer votes in Michigan than George W. Bush did in 2004. George W. Bush lost the state of Michigan. Trump won it. Why? No one showed up to vote for Hillary Clinton because she's an egregiously terrible human being, and nobody wanted to watch her for 4 years when you could watch the Trump show, which is at least entertaining.
It's been pretty entertaining.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just want the mooch to come back, that's all.
Zach, I find this fascinating. He says that he's an enrolled member of the Native American tribe, and he's not sure how to balance his conservative values and his tribal culture. So he asks you, how do you feel about Native American tribal sovereignty?
So my feeling is that, originally Native American tribal sovereignty was offered on the basis of the American government basically usurping traditional Native American land. So I understand that. The question is not really how I feel about the American government's treatment of Native Americans. It's more, do I think that individuals in the Native American community ought to feel a necessity to stay living on a reservation? And there, I'll plead ignorance. I mean, if you feel like in order to preserve your cultural connection, you have to live on a reservation, that's fine. But if you want to live a life that has more economic upside, if you want to live outside a reservation, I would suggest that if you look at the rates of poverty and alcoholism in Native American tribal reservations, they're extraordinarily high. And sometimes you'd be better off trying to preserve Native American culture by moving into the mainstream, moving outside the reservations, and joining the rest of American culture and still trying to preserve what you have. I mean, this is sort of the same question people had about Jews when Jews used to live in ghettos. Okay, should we continue to ghettoize ourselves, or should we move out into the broader world? I'm more of a fan of move out into the broader world and still retain your culture.
Carter wants to know, would you recommend going to undergraduate in state to save money and then going to a better law school? Or should I spend more money on undergrad and go to a school like University of Chicago instead?
So it depends on whether you are set on going to a postdoc or if you are just going to go undergrad. So here's the reality. In the job market, your grad school matters a lot more than where you went to college. So if you went to law school and at Harvard, like I did, and you went to UCLA for undergrad, then no one cares about the UCLA, everyone cares about the Harvard, because Harvard was another screening process. Understand that the name of the school matters only insofar as it's a screening process for smart people. So it's a shortcut we use, a mental shortcut. If I say I went to Harvard Law, people know, okay, I'm smarter than the guy, I'm probably smarter than the guy who went to Southwestern School of Law, right? It's just a mental shortcut. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, but that's sort of the general rule. Well, once you've gotten into Harvard Law, it doesn't matter if you went to junior college out here, as long as you got into Harvard Law.
That's what's on the resume. That's like
That's the big thing, right? So if you got into a better school afterward, then no one's going to care where you went to undergrad. If you just want to go to a good undergrad, University of Chicago is a great school, so why not?
All right. So hope that answered his question. Who do you think was the best Democratic president?
The best Democratic president? Well, let's see. I'm going through all of them in my head since the advent of the Democratic Party and having a tough time. The best Democratic president. In the modern era, Truman.
Okay. Why?
Because Truman was at least hard-headed on foreign policy with regard to the Cold War. His economic policies were not great, but with regard to the Cold War, he seemed to understand the nature of the Iron Curtain, which is something that many Democrats did not. JFK was sort of cut from the same cloth as Truman. They were basically similar presidents in many ways. The Democratic Party truly did not go fully and completely off the rails with regard to domestic policy with regard to foreign policy until late. I mean, that was really after the Cold War, with McGovern probably is where the Democratic Party went completely off the rails on foreign policy. On domestic policy, they were off the rails with FDR. They got back on the rails a little bit with JFK. They went off the rails again with LBJ. As far as the early Democratic Party, like the Democratic Republican Party, as in like Thomas Jefferson, I think Jefferson was a decent president. I don't think he was, I agree with a lot of Jefferson's states' rights sort of principles, his devolution to the local authorities.
Okay. Taylor wants to know that when you're discussing or arguing politics with a friend, especially one that probably or mostly agrees with you on a lot of topics, when do you or where do you draw the line on explaining why you think that they're wrong?
So it depends if I want to keep them as friends or not. So as I said earlier, I think that friends are largely useless. What I mean by that is not that that it's terrible to have lots of friends. All I mean is that if you can't have open and honest discussions with your friends, then you're unlikely to actually be good friends with them. Like, I only make friends with people with whom I can have open and honest discussions, even when we disagree, because otherwise I don't feel comfortable. Like, the whole purpose of being friends with somebody is that you're comfortable enough to say whatever and to tell them the truth. And if I can't tell them the truth, then I don't. So if you're asking me, like, for acquaintances, then when it starts to get uncomfortable, then I cut and we move to another topic, because what's the point? I tend to gauge in conversation what's the purpose of the conversation? Is the conversation driven toward me convincing you, or is it driven toward me, hearing myself talk, or is it driven toward me trying to prepare for a debate somewhere else? I mean, every conversation has a different purpose.
So, like, situationally, if you were a guest in someone else's home.
Yeah, I'm pretty polite in somebody else's home, unless I feel like it's purposeless to be polite, in which case I'm rude. I mean, I mean, there is a story where when I was at Harvard Law, I made a girl cry at a Chabad dinner, like on a Friday night. I have some. That was sad. It wasn't because she wanted to go out with him. No, it definitely was not, and vice versa. It was because she was. It's actually kind of a funny story. So she and her boyfriend were sitting across the table from me, and she was making the case that America should adopt the mandatory maximum 40-hour work week like France had, and I said that's a stupid and terrible idea. And she said, why? And I explained to her economically why that is so, and how you'll end up with an undersupply of labor, an artificial boost to all the prices, inflation, and all the rest. And her boyfriend starts nodding, because her boyfriend's like, that's true. That's true. And she started to get more and more angry. And she started to get very, very, kind of nasty. And finally I said, listen, you don't know anything about what you're talking about. You really shouldn't vote. Like, please don't vote, because you clearly don't know what you're talking about. And then she took that as, oh my God, you're saying that women shouldn't vote? She didn't even take it that way, because I wasn't saying, I may have explicitly said, I'm not saying women shouldn't vote. There are lots of women who know what they're talking about. You're just not one of them. But she started getting upset and crying. And then I heard her and her boyfriend arguing downstairs because he agreed with me. And then they came back up, and then she wanted to re-engage in the conversation. I was like, no, we're done here. Like, once I make you cry, the conversation is sort of over. That's awkward. That was awkward. I had many awkward dinner conversations at the Chabad of Cambridge. That was Friday nights were an interesting time.
Patrick says, hey, Ben, if we can assume we're on a collision course with ISIS in one way or another, do you think Sherman had it right in that the only moral way to engage in a war is to get it over with as soon as possible? Yeah, I think that's exactly correct. I mean, it's
it depends on the nature of the casualties you're going to sustain. If we took that to its logical extension, presumably you just nuke whoever you're fighting. But you do have to take into account civilian life. So I think that I would only add one factor: how many lives you are attempting to preserve in the process.
Okay.
So as quick and expediently as possible with the least loss of life. And finding that formula is difficult. I mean, that's why war is tough. I mean, we have the power to wipe out anybody on the face of the earth, like right now, the United States. But we don't nuke everybody because we wish to preserve life and provide, the possibility of a better tomorrow for a lot of the people in whose countries we're fighting.
Do you think, my husband and I were actually talking about this earlier, because there was a little earthquake here in Los Angeles last night, and so we were talking about what's our emergency plan, like if stuff goes down.
Okay.
You have Shapiro Stand,
right,
which you have a large moat around.
Correct.
And alligators and bombs and all
guns
that stuff.
and all, yes.
And all that
yeah,
stuff.
Exactly.
Is it likely for a country, whether it's North Korea, Russia, China, like would they really bomb the United States? Like, what is in
Not unless
that
they're
for them?
suicidal. Not unless they're suicidal. This is why everybody who's deeply worried about North Korea is going to nuke us. They'd have to be insane to do that. I mean, it's possible they're insane, but I think that would be the end of the Kim regime. And the only thing Kim seems to care about is preserving his
own regime.
His own regime. And yes, we are well stocked. We are well stocked. I assume that you have lots of Wink wine over there,
Yep.
and My Patriot Supply.
Absolutely.
We have like the full deal
Yep.
of things that you need in case of
Plenty of water.
Exactly.
Got the ammo.
Perfect.
Good to go. Hopefully
Exactly.
Governor Brown isn't watching. Now he knows where to come and get it. As a college student, based on the poll done recently, how do you propose we go about convincing college students that violence is not okay to shut down speech that they don't like?
I mean, I think that we ought to tell them that their feelings are completely irrelevant to this particular conversation and that they have no right to shut down speech. It's the coddling that makes them think this. It's not the confrontation that makes them think this. Right? The coddling makes them think it's okay to shut down people they disagree with. When you confront them and say, "Listen, you and I disagree, but I don't want to shut you down. You don't have the right to shut me down." It's very hard for them to. It's hard for them to say that to your face.
So is the coddling ever going to stop?
No. I mean, the only thing that will stop the coddling is when students and parents decide that they no longer want to engage in the coddling. And I think that time is coming. Actually, I think that there will be a backlash soon because these students are just not prepared for life.
Speaking of students, David says that he is a student in the public school system and wants to know if he should challenge the evident liberalism that's laced throughout the classrooms and within the public school curriculum or stay silent.
Okay, so this is a case-by-case basis. So you need to determine whether the teachers are actually going to be receptive to you talking about these issues or whether you're just going to get graded down. I have never been a fan of the idea that you should purposefully sound off against a teacher if it means getting a D in the course and hampering your future ability to get ahead, because you're just giving power to people who are your political enemies. There's no reason to do that. Again, think about what's the purpose of the conversation. What I found when I was in college is sometimes professors didn't want to hear it, and so I'd be better off waiting until we were in the room with the TA and then talking with the other students in the room with the TA, because the TA didn't usually care as much as the professor did. And I remember there was one particular class, a geography class, where the professor was, his name's on the tip of my tongue, but he was an actual communist, and he was trying to convert everyone to communism, and by the end of the class, I'd convinced about 1/3 of the class that I was right. It started off like wildly disproportionately against me, and by the end of the class, I'd sort of convinced 1/3 that we were on the right side of the aisle, and he used to just, in the middle of class, when he wanted a counter opinion, he would just say, "Somebody from Republican row up there," and there was like a whole row of us.
You sat together?
Yeah, exactly. It was like the Bloods and the Crips.
Warriors come out and play. Eleanor wants to know, if you were to become president, what laws and policies would you put in place, specifically with regards to abortion, transgenderism, gay marriage, etc.?
Well, I mean, it depends on the kind of laws that you're talking about. So if I were president, the law that I would pursue on same-sex marriage is not a federal law on same-sex marriage. It would be a federal attempt to move the government out of the business of marriage and to protect religious freedom, which is what I think needs to be protected. And the reason I say that is because if I can put in place a law that enshrines traditional marriage again, unless it's a constitutional amendment, then the left is immediately going to come back in and just get rid of that law as soon as I'm gone, and they're going to go back to status quo ante. So what I would suggest instead is just establishing marriage at the government level, and instead, you want your church to perform only traditional marriages, great. We'll have a law in the books that says that you can do whatever you want on this issue. I mean, it's called the First Amendment. We shouldn't have to have a law for it, but we do need religious freedom restoration acts on the state level and the federal level. As far as transgenderism, I would not encode in federal policy the perverse notion that the federal government is in charge of paying for your sex change, for example.
Like we did for Chelsea Manning?
Yeah, I think that's absurd. And I would also not I would also fight very hard the ridiculous notion that the Civil Rights Act is supposed to cover, the Title IX of the Civil Rights Act is supposed to cover transgenderism. You can't have it both ways. Either the Civil Rights Act is based on discrimination against women, or it's based on there's no distinction between women and men. You cannot do both of those things at once. I'd be mostly concerned on these scores. It would be mostly about preserving religious freedom rather than, and getting the government out of the business of funding everything altogether. So that sort of takes care of the problem more generally.
So unfortunately, I have to bring it back to Hillary Clinton.
Why?
Someone wants to know if you
don't
plan on
have
reading
to.
her new book, what happened?
So I was mocking, Emily Butler is our social media director, and we were on a plane, and I was mocking her incessantly because she looked like such a lefty. She was sitting on the plane reading Hillary Clinton's book, and I said, why are you wasting your life doing this? And she said, basically, it's pure delight because it's just Hillary Clinton suffering for 400 pages.
And blaming everything on Russia and Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, and my big thing is if I can get away with not reading the book, I'd prefer to do that because I really don't need to hear her whine for, I mean, I listened to her whine for legitimately 20 years of my life. I don't need to spend more of my time listening to her whine. I want to just go away.
And a lot during the debates and during the campaign.
And now, it's horrifying.
And all that stuff. Jacqueline wants to know, do you think anti-discrimination law infringes upon a firm's right to freedom of association?
Yes. I'm not in favor of anti-discrimination laws. I'm in favor of capitalism. If you want to discriminate against somebody, then you are probably going to lose business. And that's the way that capitalism works. This is why people say, well, what if they were to discriminate against Jews? They did discriminate against Jews. And you know what Jews did? They went and they built like Hillcrest Country Club. They built their own country clubs. And now no one discriminates against Jews because why would they want to leave that money on the table? I think the same is true for in business virtually always. There's always going to be somebody who caters to your needs. And competition tends to drive people who discriminate out of the market. But if I want to discriminate, then I should certainly be able to pick and choose my clients. I mean, we do here. Like if somebody wanted to call me up and say, listen, I'm on the left and I want you to write a speech for me, I should be able to say no, right? And I want you to write if they say I want you to write a note for my same-sex wedding, I should be able to say no. And if you're a same-sex marriage advocate, if somebody walks into your bakery and they say, I want a not Adam and Steve cake, if you're a same-sex baker, then you should be able to say, no, I don't feel like doing this for you.
So
no, I think anti-discrimination law is largely a problem.
So a kind of fashion grooming question from Jacob that I don't think I know the answer to this. Would you ever grow a beard?
So it's really itchy. So in Jewish law, there's a 3-week period where you're not supposed to shave unless it's for career reasons. So because I do a TV show, I have to shave. But the temptation is great to be a lazy ass and never shave. But thank God I have Dollar Shave Club, so I no longer need to worry about it because Dollar Shave Club is excellent. So I don't see myself growing a beard.
You with the beard.
It makes my personality even darker. See the eyebrows? It's like that, except just around my face. So.
And really, it's up to Dr. Shapiro.
Oh yeah, she doesn't like the beard. Yeah,
okay.
she
then that's the deciding
so that's
factor.
Not happening.
Yeah, that really is.
And she's a very beautiful and attractive woman, and the last thing that I would want to do is alienate that. So.
PJ wants to say shout out to his fiance Claire. Apparently, she's your biggest fan, and also
hello Claire.
Also has a question: if you could pick any figure in American history post 1865, who would you have been?
Who would I have been?
Yeah.
Well, who do I most sympathize with is probably Calvin Coolidge. Because Coolidge, as a president, was basically a guy who said, listen, my job is just to administrate, and that's it. Like, there are so many great stories. They called him Silent Cal because he actually didn't like talking. He was actually a very good speaker. If you
so
read
he's the opposite of you.
Yeah, I like talking. But he was a great speaker, but he was also, like me, he was a bit of a misanthrope. And he didn't, he wasn't big on like the handshaking and the baby kissing so much. I'm actually a lot warmer than Cal was, believe it or not, Alicia. But what he did was his whole shtick was, listen, I'm here to do a job. I do my job and then I leave you alone.
I kind of like that idea.
It's awesome. I wish the president would do that, right? I've always said the president should basically be a glorified DMV worker. He's there to do a job. He should leave me. He should do it, and he should leave me alone.
Except most DMV workers aren't that good.
That is true.
So Calvin Coolidge is who you would want to be, or you sympathize with?
He's the one who I most sympathize with. Who I'd want to be? I mean, the sinful part of me says you'd want to be JFK.
Ew, I did not need to know that.
I mean, every man would like to be JFK, and the sinful part of him is going to hell. Then the non-sinful part of me, post 1865, you'd have to say Reagan or Coolidge, probably.
Okay. Who are the top 5 worst presidents in American history?
Worst presidents. Okay, so Buchanan's always on the list. You'd have to put, let's see, who else is generally on the list of terrible presidents? Buchanan because he led up to the Civil War. In the 20th century, I would put LBJ on there. I think LBJ was an awful president. The left loves LBJ. I think LBJ did more damage to the country than any president in the last 50 years. He was, the one good thing that he did was the first few provisions of the Civil Rights Act. But the institution of the welfare state was egregiously terrible. The Vietnam War obviously was pursued in horrible fashion. He was a garbage president, LBJ. I would put Obama on the top 5. He's done tremendous damage to American standing around the world. And I think that he's fundamentally shifted the way Americans think about the nature of government. I think he's a very change-oriented president. And there are a bunch of failed presidents between Jackson and Lincoln. There are a bunch of presidents who did like 5 seconds in office. William Henry Harrison was there for 5 seconds, then died.
But worst on the level of like maybe the damage that
the
they
most
did.
damaging, Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson for sure. He might be number 1. Woodrow Wilson was super, super terrible. And I'd put FDR on that list. I think FDR was a garbage president who lengthened the Great Depression by something on the order of 8 years.
So we have FDR, LBJ, Woodrow Wilson, Barack Obama,
and Buchanan. I think that's a fair top 5.
I'm actually surprised.
Carter misses it. Carter comes in number 6. I'm not sure that Carter actually makes the list.
Really?
Because Carter's only there for 4 years,
Okay.
and he's immediately followed by Ronald Reagan. So it's hard for me to put him on the list. He's not the most damaging. I think it was
But
it's
had
hard
he
for me
not
to
been
separate.
followed by Ronald Reagan, he could have been more damaging.
Yes, if he'd been there for 8 years and if he'd been good at his job. But his incompetent stupidity meant that he was not as damaging. I think the other people that I mentioned were probably more damaging than Carter. Carter comes in number 6 on my list.
All right, Daniel wants you to know that he's a right-leaning libertarian and he also happens to be Jewish. So how do you deal with family get-togethers without leaving angry? My cousin trying to explain the gender spectrum to me is just infuriating.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't talk politics. Extended family gatherings, I don't bother talking politics because one of two things will happen. Either I'll make a good argument and they won't listen, or I'll make a good argument and they will listen and will cry. And that never ends well. That's just not great.
So Eric says that he loves the show and he frequently hears you refer to Antifa as communist, anarchist thugs. Does this mean you don't also consider them fascist? If not, can you please explain the distinction?
So communism is sort of, fascism is more of a methodology than it is an actual ideology. And this is something people make a mistake about. Fascism basically talks about centralized power. There's a technical definition of fascism under sort of Mussolini's definition of fascism. Fascism originally comes from the word fascisti, which means a bundle of sticks. This is how Mussolini thought of society, that we were all individual sticks, but when you bundle us together, we are stronger. And so it was the idea of the collective being more important than the individual, but we were also going to allow private industry. We were going to instead organize private industry so that it was like so that the entire, the word corporation actually comes from this notion, so that the entire economy was like a human body, and instead of there being fingers competing with each other, there would just be one finger per industry. And so it was all very organized top-down. Very centralized government, different levels of redistribution inside fascism, and always very top-down in terms of cultural domination. So that's more of if you look at Hitler, he's a great example of this. He would vary from right to left a lot. Like sometimes he'd be very pro-business, and sometimes he'd be super-duper anti-business, confiscate business property, regulate it, have the government take everything over. So the idea that fascism is an element of the right is not correct. It's more of a methodology that is more often used by what we in America would consider the left. I mean, this is actually a distinction that we need to make. People mix this up all the time. When people like me say the Nazis were left, people say, how could they be left? They were right-wing. Everybody knows they were right-wing. In terms of European politics, they were right-wing because there is no right-wing to actual European politics. American conservatism is about limited government and individual freedom. That does not exist in Europe. Okay, Europe does not have this concept of parties that are about individual rights and individual freedom.
We saw that recently with the French politics.
Right, exactly. So the right in France is more about nationalism, right, and it's not about individual rights and individual freedom and limited government. It's about big government that ensures that our nation is protected, and then the left is about big government that ensures that our nation is redistributive. That's the big argument there. But neither of those groups really line up with American political conservatism.
So this is kind of fun. Everybody obviously knows that you play the violin. You played it for Larry King when you were a wee lad. And then today,
Michael Knowles for
on Michael Knowles'
his date with roaming
hot
millennial.
date today with roaming millennial. Do any of the other people on the Daily Wire crew play instruments, like Michael, Andrew?
So Michael plays the harmonica, the guitar, the ukulele.
Really?
Yep, I've seen him in here doing that.
Can we get him in like a lei and a grass skirt, like April Fool's Day?
If you ask him, he would do it. Not on April Fool's Day, I'm sure. Anything that allows Knowles to go shirtless. It's one of the great miseries of our existence here at the Daily Wire office is that we've installed a curtain in the makeup room so that we can change our shirts before the show. Some of us use the curtain, Michael. Some of us don't.
Hint, hint.
It's a horror show.
So Michael plays a lot of instruments.
Yeah, Jeremy plays the piano.
Okay.
I'm trying to
Does
think
Andrew
who else.
play any?
You play violin.
I play violin, but not as well as you.
Granted.
And I play... Although I did request, for the record, when Ben was practicing before Michael's show, I was like, Devil Went Down to Georgia, go.
Yeah.
And he couldn't do it, so.
Because I don't even know that song, because that's not my jam.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Yeah, sorry.
You're not a great American, sir.
How dare you? How dare you? She used to work for Sean Hannity. So that is the ultimate slap in the face.
Throw that. Well, and also Charlie Daniels used to do the Freedom Concert.
That's true.
So that's why I threw that out there.
That's true.
Sorry.
Trying to think who else. You guys know who else plays an instrument around here?
Does anyone have a good singing voice?
I say, except for me. My singing voice is beautiful. How
Yeah.
dare you?
No.
Everyone who's listened to the show has heard me sing "Stars" from Les Mis, and it is a masterful work of heartbreaking genius.
So we have a big fan from Europe, and who wants to know what you think about Milo's Free Speech Week in UC Berkeley, and why you didn't accept the invite when he apparently invited you to speak there too.
So number one, I would never be on a stage with Milo. I think that Milo is an egregious specimen of humanity. He is.
You stated as much last week when you were at Berkeley.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty clear about my feelings about Milo, and I've laid it out in a number of pieces. I don't really feel the need to get into it in detail now. As far as Free Speech Week, look, he has the right to speak the same that I do. I can disagree with him, and he has the right to speak. The one thing that I would be interested to see is whether they actually jump through the requisite hoops, meaning that obviously the UCPD did what it was supposed to do when I was there. They sent 500, 600 cops, and they were prepared for violence, and they tamped it down, and they did what they needed to do. And that means that we had to jump through hoops and work with them. I don't know whether there have been a lot of stories about whether the Free Speech Week is actually doing that, or whether it's sort of a publicity scam, that maybe there's a shtick going on where Milo wants a publicity fight, and so he either says that Berkeley didn't do what it was supposed to do, or they go there and there's violence. I hope not. I hope that Milo actually just wants to go there and talk, but you do have to work with security there, because unfortunately Antifa's a thing. We can't just pretend Antifa's not a thing. They are a thing. Milo knows that better than anyone. So you have to let the UCPD do their job, and that means working with them and ensuring that you give them all the information they need and fulfill whatever hoops they have to jump through. We can talk about whether the hoops are justified or not, but you at least have to do the basics before we can say that Berkeley didn't do its job.
So this is kind of fun. Tiana is a fan in Ireland, and she wants to know if you have any plans for international speaking engagements.
Yes. So we are actually going to do a tour, I believe, to UK.
Wow.
There's one of the colleges over there wants to give me an award, so I think I'm going to come over there and do that probably sometime this year. We'll probably do a week-long stint, and we'll hit a bunch of the colleges, and so that'll be fun.
So she'll have to take a short little plane ride.
Yeah. Well, then we'll go do. No, I think one of them is in Ireland. I think we're actually
so
going to
you
go
want
to
to hit
Ireland.
up? So you're going to do Britain and.
Well, I mean, UK is all those things, right?
Hashtag
Unless
moment.
unless she's in Southern Ireland.
Oh,
right?
Okay. She did not
That's
specify.
possible if she did not specify.
Okay. How do Old Testament generational curses and blessings mesh with modern day individualism?
My belief is that the blessings and curses sections are generally communal. If you read the blessings and curses, the tochacha, as we call it in Hebrew, in Deuteronomy, for example, then that is largely about what the community does and then God punishing the community. It's not necessarily about the one-to-one correlation between you do something wrong and God smacks you. It's not quite that clear in everyday life, and that's so that God can provide you the room to exercise your free will. If you were to commit a sin and God were to immediately punch you in the face, you would stop sinning, and you also would not have free will, because there would be a perfect correlation between cause and effect. So God tends to hide himself so that you have the ability to choose to be with him. That's sort of the goal.
What do you think the future of Europe is?
Well, I mean, they're either going to get wise, or they're going to become chaotic. I mean, right now, Europe has to decide what it is. They have to decide what values they stand for, and they have to move against the multicultural stupidity that has been eating them from the inside. Even people like Angela Merkel understand that now, or at least have been making those sorts of statements.
Ben further asked, do you think that civil wars or slow cultural and political change will happen there?
Civil wars are usually pretty rare. I would say that slow cultural and political change is usually the norm until later it breaks into civil war, right?
Kyle wants to take you out to dinner when you are at the University of Utah on the 27th.
Well, that's very nice of him. I'm not sure if I'm going to be around there long enough for that, nor do
Is
I
there
know Kyle.
kosher food?
I don't know.
Is
It's a
there
good question. I don't know if there's a kosher restaurant in Salt Lake City.
You're going to have to.
I don't know the answer.
and
Also, Kyle, all due respect to you, but I don't know if you're a serial killer. So, like,
he says that he and his wife are really big fans and that they'd pay for your security team too.
oh, that's very sweet of them.
So-
That's very sweet of them. Well, we can try to make something happen.
And he also wants to know what your favorite food is.
So my favorite food for a long time, for many a year, was ravioli.
Really?
Loved ravioli. Ravioli is glorious.
But what kind of ravioli?
I like to cheese ravioli.
Okay. And what's your
Like
favorite food
ricotta
now?
cheese ravioli. So it was steak, but I can no longer eat steak, which annoys me.
Why?
I have this thing where it's like this esophageal thing. I get like chest pain when I eat steak, which is
Oh, but
horrifying.
Steak is wonderful.
I know.
Oh,
I know.
I feel bad for you.
I feel bad for me too.
Matt Berry is asking, what's your favorite satire account or writers?
So the funniest guy on Twitter is Iowa Hawk. Iowa Hawk is hysterically funny. Also, DPRK is really funny. And I like the Babylon Bee. I think Babylon Bee does some really funny work.
Okay, we are almost out of time, folks, so I'm trying to get to as many questions as possible. Lots of people are saying that you should really try bacon.
Well, they can say that, but like, if they want to spend the time in hell for me, I guess they can volunteer. I mean,
Jeremiah wants to know if you've ever been to Israel.
yes, I've been to Israel 2 times. I was there when I was 16 with my family, and I was there when I was married.
And what was your favorite part? You better say the getting married there part.
Well, I mean, obviously, but aside from that, Jerusalem's always incredible. Jerusalem's amazing. I also like Tzfat. If you've never been to Tzfat, Tzfat is it's called the holy city of Tzfat, and it's they have like a whole artist colony, and it's a Kabbalist city. Like it was very spiritual and mystical. So there's a lot of that feeling there. It's really cool.
Do you have any plans to go back?
Yeah, I'd like to go back sometime in the next year.
Maybe we can get some international speeches going over in Israel for
Yeah,
you.
maybe we'll lead a tour.
Okay, let's try to do maybe final question because
Okay.
I feel like this is going to take a little bit to answer. What is your stance on net neutrality? This comes from Eric Phillips. And can you explain it simply so that others can understand what it actually is?
Okay, so net neutrality, from what I understand, is the proposition that ISPs, internet service providers, should be forced to load all pages at the same speed. The idea here would be that if you have a blog, that it should load at the same speed as Google. I am not in favor of this. The reason I'm not in favor of this is because it actually enshrines the dominance of a lot of the current a lot of the current leaders in the industry. It actually enshrines it prevents the ISPs from upcharging places like Google and Facebook and charging them extra to load faster. So that's what it really does. So that's why Google and Facebook are for it. So when people say corporations are against net neutrality, it depends on the corporation. Google and Facebook are both for net neutrality because it basically means treating the internet like a utility. We all get charged the same for water and power. It would be the same thing for websites. You all get charged the same for the amount of internet usage. Well, if you want competition in the marketplace, then you should be able to charge what you want in the marketplace as an ISP. In order for that to truly happen, though, you need to deregulate ISPs. Right now, there are a lot of local regulations on internet service providers, building in the fiber optic cable, for example. And so it's made it very difficult. In a lot of places, there are only 2 or 3 internet service providers, so there really isn't enough competition to generate the kind of competition necessary to lower prices. You really need to deregulate the whole system. I think that net neutrality it's, as always, when there's a government regulation that does something bad, there's another government regulation that's supposed to correct it and generally makes things worse. I don't think net neutrality fixes it.
Okay, we have 1 minute and time for one more question. It comes from Richard. Do you think that America will be a full-blown socialist country in the next 20 years? And if not 20, maybe 30?
I don't think it's going to be a full-blown socialist country. I think that every quote-unquote full-blown socialist country, it depends. Are we talking Venezuela? I don't think we're going to be Venezuela in 20 or 30 years. Do I think that we could be more like Great Britain and have serious financial difficulties because we're paying for everybody's health care? I think that's very likely. And then I think in 60 years we'll be moving back toward capitalism again, because you see that from Denmark and Norway and a lot of the so-called northern European states, these supposed paradisical socialist states that have been cutting their governments radically because they're now going bankrupt. So there is an ebb and flow to how much the government can spend.
So it's a trend.
Yeah.
All right, let's hope it doesn't trend in the bad direction, though.
I hope not, yeah.
Knock on wood. I know you're doing your part to try to fight that.
Exactly.
So, everyone, thank you for tuning in to this very inaugural first episode edition of The Conversation with the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro. Be sure to tune in on October 17th, where we will be talking to Andrew Klavan. Thanks so much for watching and for asking questions. And if you want to be able to ask questions next time, be sure to go to dailywire.com and become a subscriber right now. crying. He's like, crap, she's hungry.
Yeah, I heard her once, and I was like, I wonder if Alicia heard that, and then couldn't stop thinking about it.
You tell me when we're done.
Yeah, for sure. You can do your thing there. We're gonna stop in a minute and a half. We're doing it the same as the podcast.
Do you just go for an extra hour?
No, not in that way. Just hold it to the stream a little bit.
We're being told the night is still on, so now's not a good time for us to curse.
Did someone say that?
Hey. Thank you, all who are saying the
I'm
night
the
is still
better
on.
singer.
Who's me?